This video will analyze Elisabetta Porcu's 2004 essay titled Religion in the State in Contemporary Japan, in which Porcu analyzes the relationship between religion and the state. Of particular interest has been the separation of religion and state by the Japanese constitution, especially in the post-war constitution of Japan. Today, the constitution ensures the freedom of religion for all, the prohibition of state privileges for religious organizations, and the non-interference of the state in religious education or other religious activities. According to Article 89 of the Constitution, no public money should be used for religious activities. Porcu looks at the historical relationship between the state and religion. Historically, this relationship between the state and religion has been complex and has undergone numerous developments. There were the Shinto directives in 1945 issued by the Supreme Commander of Allied Powers, or SCAP, to bring an end to state Shinto. State Shinto was a system where state support was granted for Shinto from the beginning of the Meiji period until the end of World War II. This is a period from 1868 until 1945. During this period, Shinto was elevated to the position of the state religion, while a series of directives and regulations were issued to ensure its privileged status over other religious organizations. There was compelled participation in shrine rituals for all citizens, a strong presence of Shinto-related activities and teachings in the field of education, the priest role of the emperor, the building of Shinto shrines in Japanese colonies, the propagation of wartime ideology, and the repression of other religions, such as Buddhism and new religious movements. There were decrees issued by the Japanese government in 1868 enacting the separating of Shinto and Buddhism, two religious systems with many internal differences that had coexisted until then. Buddhism was impacted as it lost its state patronage and suffered persecutions through what is called the Haibutsu Kushaku, which translates literally to abolish the Buddha, destroy Shakyamuni campaign. During this period, many Buddhist temples were destroyed. Before 1868, there were strong ties between the state and Buddhism, such as in the ancient Ritsuryo system, the Edo period from 1600 to 1868, and the state-sponsored temple registration system. Most recently, the Shinto directives and the post-war constitution legally abolished state Shinto and separated religion from the state. Today, the separation of religion and state has led to different interpretations and has raised legal questions that are difficult to resolve. For instance, the formation of political parties by religious groups is not disallowed by the Japanese constitution and has led to the involvement of religious institutions in politics. We see this with various new religious movements, such as the creation of Komeito in 1964, or the Clean Government Party, founded by the largest new religious movement in Japan, Soko Gakkai. Komeito became one of the three major parties, but was criticized for religion intruding into public affairs. Criticism especially concerned the party's reliance on the fusion of Buddhism and politics. There's also Shinrikyo that created the Shinrito, or the Supreme Truth Party, and in 1990 ran in the elections, although none of its candidates won a seat in parliament. Another new religious movement, called Kofuku no Gaku, translated to Happy Science, was founded in 1986 and established its own political party, the Happiness Realization Party, in 2009. This party was initiated during the crisis caused by the North Korean nuclear missile tests, and its election campaign in 2009 took an aggressive stance against North Korea. This party claims to want to restore the religious spirit of Japan and ran in the elections between 2009 and 2012, but won no seats in parliament. In the case of the Happiness Realization Party, the borders between politics and religion tends to vanish. The party does not make any secret of its aim to create a state where religion plays a fundamental role in every aspect of society. Japan would be a religious state under their governance, which would be the starting point for the realization of a utopia of a Buddha land destined to encompass the whole world. According to the Happiness Realization Party, quote, Japan should offer a model of a religious nation, end quote, for the rest of the world. But as noted, this role is impeded by the separation of religion and state sanctioned by the Japanese constitution. But the party sees this as an external imposition by the Western powers following the defeat in World War II. Religion and politics, according to the Happiness Realization Party, should be integrated. Various scholars have highlighted several aspects of secularization in Japan, such as the institutional decline of religion and difficulties experienced by temples and shrines, especially in rural areas. For some, secularization is seen as the privatization and the processes of deprivatizing Shinto and Buddhism in the public sphere. The debate over the separation of the religious and the secular is often linked to another issue, namely the concept of religion itself in the Japanese context, as exemplified by the word shukyo, which translates to religion. It's also noted that Shinto has attempted to re-establish itself in the Japanese society. Shinto acquired the status of state religion during the period of 1868 to 1945. It was closely connected with governmental affairs but lost the status after World War II and was removed from the public sphere. Shinto has, through related groups and associations, tried to reaffirm its authority in the public sphere and society through politically oriented activities, in particular in politics and education. Some scholars have seen these attempts as a Shinto-related neo-nationalistic response to the imposition of a foreign social order on Japan. Since the end of the occupation in 1952, religious and political leaders have quickly mobilized forces to restore Shinto to public life. The motivation for such a re-engagement arose from a feeling of having been colonized by the Allied powers and of a loss in the public sphere. A number of organizations that have attempted to deprivatize Shinto, two of which include Jinjo Honsho, translated as the Association of Shinto Shrines, and the Shinto Seiji Renmei, translated to Shinto Association of Spiritual Leadership. The Shinto Association of Spiritual Leadership wants a revision of the constitution and the renationalization of rights for the glorious war dead at the Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo. It also wants an education system based on pre-war moral and religious principles. The Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo is both important and controversial in Japanese religion, as it provides a clear example of how the borders between state and religion blur. In Yasukuni, since the Meiji period, military personnel who died in Japanese wars have been enshrined. The Yasukuni Shrine became a powerful tool for propagating wartime ideology, and today remains a controversial site that aims to revive nationalism and the role of Shinto in public affairs. The shrine occupies a central position in the government's revival of pre-war Shinto symbolism. It is also central to an emerging myth of national identity and as a symbol for power struggle. The shrine has been a source of controversy. From 1969 to 1974, the Liberal Democratic Party made several attempts to pass a bill to reinstate support for the shrine, but due to strong criticism by various religious groups and activists, these plans failed. Various Japanese prime ministers have made official visits to the shrine, raising harsh protests from religious groups and individuals concerned with the violation of the separation of state and religion. Other lawsuits have been undertaken by members of bereaved families who strongly objected to the forced enshrinement of their relatives in Yasukuni. All these have condemned such actions as an infringement of Article 20 of the Constitution and of religious freedom. While some of these lawsuits were successful, others failed, and other legal battles include those against the use of public funds for performing Shinto rituals. According to Elisabetta Porcu, author speaks of how the sensitive borders between religion and the state in Japan have raised not only criticism, but also intricate legal questions. It is also important to note that Shinto is not the only religious tradition that has tried to re-establish itself in society. Scholars have analyzed the active participation of Buddhism in the public sphere. One scholar noticed that after the earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear power plant accident in Fukushima in 2011, there has been an increase in the activities carried out by religious organizations, in particular by Buddhist organizations in the public sphere. Through the 1990s, the common view was that Buddhism and religion in general had abandoned the public sphere and became a private matter. But this has changed somewhat, as after the 2011 disaster, Buddhist groups have tried to get their voices heard in society, in particular with regard to the nuclear power policy pursued by the government. These examples show the subtle and complex dynamics at work when considering the separation of religion and the state and the participation of religion in public affairs. There is another area where the boundaries between the religious and the secular tend to vanish, such as in Japanese towns and villages that are divided into neighborhoods, many of which are linked to a Shinto shrine. Each neighborhood is organized through what are called neighborhood associations. These associations play a pivotal role in community life, and through them the boundaries between the religious and the secular often vanish. Some activities carried out by the neighborhood associations today are related to religion, such as organizing festivals at the local level. Funding for such festivals and religious activities, many of which are linked to Shinto, come from monthly fees paid by residents of the neighborhood. This has brought about criticism from members of other religious traditions, leading many to refuse to pay the required fees for Shinto festivals, and others have refused to join the association. Another point Professor Porcu raises is that there seems to be a process of secularization as religious events are being promoted as cultural events. Religious events such as festivals and pilgrimages are promoted as cultural events, and their religious aspects are often overlooked and downplayed. Religious sites like those related to pilgrimages have undergone this process. In the government's campaign to gain UNESCO World Heritage recognition, it may not list religious activities on the Japanese inventory, but it may promote them as cultural pursuits. We see this in how the Shikoku pilgrimage has been reformulated in public representation as a brand and as a holiday hiking and heritage trail by one of the organizations involved in the UNESCO campaign. In order for pilgrimages to be successful, the focus has been shifted from the religious character to tourism and heritage. This shifting is seen as a further sign of an increasing secularization in Japan. This notion of promoting religious events as cultural events can also be considered an attempt to circumvent the constitutional regulations as expressed by Articles 20 and 89 in the Constitution, and thus to overcome the thin line of separation between the religious and the secular spheres. In conclusion, what Porcu's study highlights is the complex relationship between religion and the state, such as the separation of religion and the state as sanctioned by the Japanese Constitution and its connection to legal issues. We noted how Shinto acquired the status of state religion in the period from 1868 to 1945, how this status was lost after World War II, and how Shinto has since tried to reaffirm its position in the public sphere through political activities, which we also noted in connection to the Yasukuni Shrine. As Professor Porcu concludes, her analysis of the separation of religion and the state reflects only a small portion of this controversial topic, which deserves further academic exploration.